Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast and Books. It is once again a somewhat little bit of a rainy day, which again, perfect for our setting for the Hound of the Baskervilles, where we are going to be reading the next chapter in, or finishing up the next chapter, or the current chapter that we're in. We're currently in the middle of chapter 7. But before we get into that, for those of you who have never seen before, my name is Courtney. I am one of the teen librarians at the Addison Public Library, and this is Breakfast and Books. We are making our way through The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. You can probably find copies of this absolutely everywhere. This is one of the most famous Sherlock Holmes stories out there. There's been many retellings and many shows and many sorts of variations thereupon. I can also guarantee that you can probably find copies with a lot better of a cover than this one. It's a horrible cover. And I will complain about that every single time because I think it's true. But hey, this is what we got. But before we dive into our story, I wanted to tell you about a book, do a little bit of a book recommendation for you. So this is a book called Romeo and or Juliet by Ryan North. It is a mixture of some Shakespeare, thus the Romeo and Juliet part. It's also a choose your own adventure book. And there's a lot of snarky, silly humor all within it. So the premise of the book is that Ryan North claims that Shakespeare, this is going to be really tough because I'm talking about Sherlock over there and Shakespeare over here, and they're just mixing in my brain. Shakespeare, the famous playwright and poet and author of many things, was actually a fraud. And he ripped off the story of Romeo and Juliet and just he found the original source of Romeo and Juliet, which supposedly is this book. And he really just picked the parts that he liked and skimmed over it and didn't really get the full story. So this is supposedly the full story and full possibility of Romeo and Juliet because it was supposed to be a game. And how it rolls is you read the first passage and then you keep going until you get to a choice. And the one with the little heart is supposedly the choices that Shakespeare picked. So you can actually follow along with like the proper Romeo and Juliet story. It's snarky and sarcastic, and there's definitely commentary, but you actually do get portions of the book where it's, from straight from Shakespeare. And it's just fun. So, for instance, the first choices that you have are get spoiled right off the bat, turn to number 3, which is right down here. You could play without spoilers, which is turned to page 36, or you can learn about the author and turn to page 22. Or on the bottom, you have all of the numbers. They're not necessarily by page number. Sometimes you get a range, like 30 to 31, because that's where those passages are. But you would just follow along and enjoy your adventure. There are also a medley of silly illustrations all throughout this. Some are done by some of my favorite. There's a whole collection of illustrators and graphic novelists. There's also a whole section in here where it's like a comic. There's just amazing artwork from a bunch of really talented people, including some of my favorites, one being Kate Beaton, who is absolutely hilarious. Um, but I mean, I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure that this cover is Kate Beaton. That's 100% her style. I really am enjoying it. I am currently reading the first book that he wrote that is based on Hamlet, or supposedly the original source of Hamlet, which is called To Be or Not to Be. And so far, I've been having a grand time. I first followed the story of King Hamlet Sr. as he was immediately murdered, and then you have to decide if he wants to be a ghost or not, and then how he wants to find out about how he died, and then how he's going to get back to Denmark, and does he swim? When he swims, does he find a pirate ship? It's a lot of fun. So if you like the classics, but you also like good humor and silly happenings, and like the choose your own adventure books are just a wonderful way to just explore and have a great time and have a game with it. And I really, really am enjoying myself with these. All right, here we go. So leaving that to the side because I will talk about it for the next hour if you let me. So let's get back to Sherlock Holmes. Where we were, I remember not much. Oh yeah, okay. So, just as a quick recap, let's see how quickly and concisely I can do this. Sherlock and his friend John Watson, who is sort of like the chronicler of his adventures, of Sherlock's adventures. John writes stories about Sherlock's detective happenings, and then he publishes them, and this is supposedly one of those. Um, John is a fictional character. All of these people are fictional characters. Moving on. So Sherlock has been asked to look into the mystery of this death and supposed supernatural curse that is haunting this particular family called the Baskerville family. And the curse is that if any member of the Baskerville family, specifically the dudes, if anybody is living at Baskerville Hall, which is a super big manor, a house they have a position of power where they live. If anyone is living there, then they are doomed to die having been chased and hunted down by this like supernatural dog beast, like a hellhound. Now Sherlock is like, there's no such thing as supernatural nonsense. But there's some spookifying going on in here. So where we are currently is the new heir. So the old one died very mysteriously. He moved back to Baskerville Hall and died very mysteriously. And I'm also realizing we're like near halfway through this story. So now we have the new heir, who is Henry Baskerville, and he is moving back in. He was in America and Canada for most of his life, so he's got an American accent. And he has just arrived and spent the first night in Baskerville Hall. Now, Sherlock did not come with. Instead, he sent John to go with him, or to go with Sir Henry Baskerville to Baskerville Hall and report back to Sherlock anything that might happen that might be interesting. So the funny thing is that Sherlock said never leave his side. So what is the first thing that they do? They get to Baskerville Hall. They spend the night, each in their respective rooms. Pardon. Each in their respective rooms, and it was super creepy. They heard a woman like sobbing, which was very mysterious. John kind of did some investigating and found out that it was the butler's wife. But the odd thing is that the butler said that his wife was not the one who was crying. Um, so why did you lie about that? What was the purpose? Um, and then you've got, this is now the next morning where everything is feeling much better. And, when you go to like a weird, old, creepy place that's got like rumors and stuff, it's always scarier in the dark when you're alone and it's new. But in the morning, it's not as intimidating. So that's where they're at now. It's now they're like, oh, this place is actually quite nice in the day. So Baskerville is working on some paperwork, and John's like, that's super boring. I'm not going to stick around with you. I'm going to go for walkies. So he goes for a walk and he meets a neighbor who lives at, oh, Crubbles. Stapleton. Hey, come on in. I'm using your room because all the other rooms available to film are busy. So,
You're live on Twitch?
I am live on Twitch. Hello, this is Sarah. Sarah is our creative studio coordinator, and I have commandeered the creative studio for this. So forgive the interruption. And also forgive my intrusion. Thank you. So all of the other rooms that we normally use are currently occupied. So this was my last resort. Okay, so where we were is so he met John met one of the neighbors out in while he was walking about, and yeah, the neighbor is a naturalist. He likes to go and explore and stuff, and he talks about how there's a mire, which is very dangerous to go into. A lot of like there's like sinkholes and things in there, and like as they're watching, they see like a cow or a horse or something like get sucked into the sinkholes, and they're just like, well, they're gone. But this neighbor is like, well, I know how to get through that area. I know how to get through pretty well. And John's like, oh, well, I guess I should go and explore there too. And he's like, no, no, really don't. You'll die. Which is totally fair. Okay, so let's see if I can get where we were. Admittedly, I was very silly and I just took out the bookmark and I missed where I was. So we'll probably have some repeats on this one. Okay. So he's talking about like maybe I'll go and explore the mire. So John says, and now remember, this is very conversational, so it's kind of hard sometimes to figure out who is speaking. Also, I cannot remember the name of the of the neighbor, and I don't want to look for it right now. Okay, so I shall try my luck someday, says John. He looked at me with a surprised face. For God's sake, put an idea out of your mind, said he. Your blood will be upon my head. I assure you that there would not be the least chance of your coming back alive. It is only by remembering certain complex landmarks that I am able to do it. Hello, I cried. What is that? A long, low moan, indescribably sad, swept over the moor. It filled the whole air, and yet it was impossible to say whence it came. From a dull murmur it swelled into a deep roar, and then sank back into a melancholy, throbbing murmur once again. Stapleton, that's the neighbor's name. Stapleton looked at me with a curious expression in his face. Strange place, the moor, he said. But what is it? The peasants say it is the hound of the Baskervilles calling for its prey. I've heard it once or twice before, but never quite so loud. Spooky. I looked round with a chill of fear in my heart at the huge swelling plain, mottled with green patches of rushes. Nothing stirred over the vast expanse save a pair of ravens, which croaked loudly from a tor behind us. You are an educated man. You don't believe such nonsense as that, said I. What do you think is the cause of so strange a sound? Well, bogs make strange noises sometimes. It's the mud settling or the water rising or something. No, no, that was a living voice. Well, perhaps it was. Did you ever hear a bittern booming? I have no idea what a bittern is. Maybe we'll find out. No, I never did. It's a very rare bird, practically extinct in England now. But all things are possible upon the moor. Yes, I should not be surprised to learn that we have heard at least the cry of the last of the bitterns. It's the weirdest, strangest thing I've ever heard in my life. Yes, it's rather an uncanny place altogether. Look at the hillside yonder. What do you make of those? The whole steep slope was covered with gray, circular rings of stone, a score of them at least. What are they? Sheep pens? No, they are the homes of our worthy ancestors. Prehistoric man lived thickly on the moor, and as no one in particular has lived there since, we find all these little arrangements exactly as he left them. These are his wigwams, the roofs off, but with the roofs off. You can even see that his hearth and his couch if you have the curiosity to go inside. But it is quite a town. When was it inhabited? Neolithic man, no date. What did he do? He grazed his cattle on these slopes, and he learned to dig for tin when the bronze sword began to supersede the stone axe. Look at the great trench in the opposite hill. That is his mark. Yes, you will find very similar points About the moor, Dr. Watson. Oh, excuse me an instant. It surely is Cleopides. Cleopides? Cyclopedes. Cyclopides. Goodness sake. Oh, okay, here's what it is. A small fly, or a moth, had fluttered across our path, and in an instant Stapleton was rushing with extraordinary energy and speed in pursuit of it. To my dismay, this creature flew straight for the great mire, and my acquaintance never paused for an instant, bounding from tuft to tuft behind it, his green net waving in the air. His gray clothes were jerky and zigzag. Irregular progress made him not unlike some huge moth himself. I was standing watching his pursuit with a mixture of admiration for his extraordinary activity and fear lest he should lose his footing in the treacherous mire, when I heard the sounds of steps and, turning around, found a woman near me upon the path. She had come from the direction in which the plume of smoke indicated the position of Merripit House. That's where Stapleton lives. But the dip of the moor had hit her until she was quite close. I could not doubt that this was Miss Stapleton, of whom I had been told, since ladies of any sort must be few upon the moor, and I remembered that I had heard someone describing her as being a beauty. The woman who approached me was certainly that, and of a most uncommon type. There could not have been a greater contrast between brother and sister, for Stapleton was neutral tinted, with light hair and gray eyes, while she was darker than any brunette that I had seen in England. Slim and elegant and tall, she was proud, finely cut face, so regular that it might have seemed impassive were it not for the sensitive mouth and the beautiful dark eager eyes. With her perfect figure and elegant dress, she was indeed a strange apparition upon a lonely moorland path. Her eyes were on her brother as I turned, and then she quickened her pace towards me. I had raised my hat and was about to make some explanatory remark when her own words turned all my thoughts into a new channel. "Go back," she said. "Go straight back to London instantly." I could only stare at her in stupid surprise. Her eyes blazed at me, and she tapped she tapped the ground impatiently with her foot. "Why should I go back?" I asked. "I cannot explain." She spoke in a low and eager voice, with a curious lisp in her utterance. "But for God's sake, do what I ask you. Go back and never set foot upon the moor again." "But I have only just come." Man, she cried, "can you not tell when a warning is for your own good? Go back to London. Start tonight. Get away from this place at all costs. Hush, my brother is coming. Not a word of what I have said. Would you mind getting the orchid, there we go, got there. Not a word of what I have said. Would you mind getting that orchid for me among the mare's tails yonder? We are very rich in orchids on the moor, though, of course, you are rather late to see the beauties of this place." Stapleton had abandoned the chase and came back to us breathing hard and flushed with his excursions. "Hello, Beryl," he said, and it seemed to me that the tone of his greeting was not altogether a cordial one. So it would be, "Hello, Beryl." "Well, Jack, you are very hot." "Yes, I was chasing a Cleopides," the moth. "He is very rare and seldom found in the late autumn. What a pity that I should have missed him." He spoke unconcernedly, but his small light eyes glanced incessantly from the girl to me. "You have introduced yourselves, I see?" "Yes, I was telling Sir Henry that it was rather late for him to see the true beauties of the moor." "Why, who do you think this is?" "Well, I imagine it must be Sir Henry Baskerville." No, said I. "Only a humble commoner, but his friend. My name is Dr. Watson." A flush of vexation passed over her expressive face. "We have been talking at cross purposes," said she. Why, you had not very much time for talk, her brother remarked with same questioning eyes. I talked as if Dr. Watson were a resident instead of merely being a visitor, said she. I cannot be much matter to him whether it is early or late for orchids, but you will come on, will you not, to see Merripit House? Oh, my words are getting all a jumbly. A short walk brought us to it, a bleak moorland house, once the farm of some grazier of the old preposterous days, but now put into repair and turned into a modern dwelling. An orchard, see, that was the word I was trying to say earlier, but she was saying orchid. Here we go. An orchard surrounded by, but the tree, ugh. An orchard surrounded the house, but the trees, as is usual upon the moor, were stinted and nipped, and the effect of the whole place was mean and melancholy. We were admitted by a strange, wizened, rusty-coated old manservant, who seemed in keeping with the house. Inside, however, there were large rooms furnished with an elegance in which I seemed to recognize the taste of the lady. So she's got style. As I looked from their windows at the interminable granite-flecked moor, rolling unbroken to the farthest horizon, I could not but marvel at what could have brought this highly educated man and this beautiful woman to live in such a place. Strange spot to choose, is it not? Said he, as if in answer to my thought. And yet we manage to make ourselves fairly happy, do we not, Beryl? Quite happy, she said, but there was no ring of conviction in her words. I had a school, said Stapleton. It was in the North Country. The work of a man of my temperament was mechanical and uninteresting. But the privilege of living with youth, of helping to mold those young minds, and of impressing them with one's own character and ideals was very dear to me. However, the fates were against us. A serious epidemic broke out in the school, and 3 of the boys died. It never recovered from the blow, and much of my capital was irretrievably swallowed up. And yet, if it were not for the loss of the charming companionship of the boys, I could rejoice over my own misfortune. For, with my strong taste for botany and zoology, I find an unlimited field of work here, and my sister is as devoted to nature as I am. All this, Dr. Watson, has brought upon your head by your expression as you surveyed the moor out of our window. It certainly did cross my mind that it might be a little dull, less for you, perhaps, than for your sister. No, I am never dull, she said quickly. We have books, we have our studies, and we have interesting neighbors. Dr. Mortimer is a most learned man in his own line. Poor Sir Charles was also an admirable companion. We knew him well, and miss him more than I can tell. Do you think that I should intrude if I were to call this afternoon and make acquaintance with Sir Henry? Oh, I'm sure he would be delighted. Then perhaps you would mention that I propose to do so. We may, in our humble way, do something to make things more easy for him until he becomes more accustomed to his new surroundings. Will you come upstairs, Dr. Watson, and inspect my collection of Lepidra? I think that's like butterflies, right? I think it is the most complete one in the southwest of England. By the time that you have looked through them, lunch will almost be ready. But I was eager to get back to my carriage. The melancholy of the moor, the death of the unfortunate pony, the weird sound which had been associated with the grim legend of the Baskervilles, all these things tinged my thoughts with sadness. Then, on the top of these more or less vague impressions, there had come the definite and distinct warning of Miss Stapleton, delivered with such intense earnestness that I could not doubt that some grave and deep reason lay behind it. I resisted all pressure to stay for lunch, and I set off at once upon my return journey, taking the grass-grown path by which we had come. It seems, however, that there must have been some short-cut for those who knew it, for before I had reached the road I was astounded to see Miss Stapleton sitting upon a rock by the side of the track. Her face was beautifully flushed with her excursions, and she held her hand to her side. "I have run all the way in order to cut you off, Dr. Watson," she said. "I had not even time to put on my hat. I must not stop, or my brother may miss me. I wanted to say to you how sorry I am about the stupid mistake I made in thinking that you were Sir Henry. Please forget the words that I said, which have no application whatsoever to you." "But I cannot forget them, Miss Stapleton," said I. "I am Sir Henry's friend, and his welfare is a very close concern of mine. Tell me why it was that you were so eager that Sir Henry should return to London." "A woman's whim, Dr. Watson. When you know me better, you will understand that I cannot always give reasons for what I say or do." "No, no, I remember the thrill in your voice. I remember the look in your eyes. Please, please be frank with me, Miss Stapleton. For ever since I have been here, I have been conscious of shadows all around me. Life has become like a great griffin. Life has become like the great Grimpen Mire, with little green patches everywhere into which one may sink and with no guide to point to the track. Tell me, then, what it is that you meant, and I promise to convey your warning to Sir Henry." An expression of irresolution passed for an instant over her face, but her eyes had hardened again as she answered me. "You make too much of it, Dr. Watson," she said. "My brother and I were very much shocked by the death of Sir Charles. We knew him very intimately, for his favourite walk was over the moor to our house. He was deeply impressed with the curse which hung over the family, and when the tragedy came, I naturally felt that there must be some grounds for his fears which he had expressed. I was distressed, therefore, when another member of the family came down to live here, and I felt that he should be warned of the danger which he will run. That was all which I intended to convey." "But what is the danger?" "You know the story of the Hound? I do not believe in such nonsense. But I do. If you had any influence in Sir Henry, take him away from a place which had always been fatal to his family. The world is wide. Why should he wish to live in a place of danger?" "Because it is the place of danger." "That is Sir Henry's nature. I fear that unless you give him some more definite information than this, it would be impossible to get him to move." "I cannot say anything definite, for I do not know anything definite." "I would ask you one more question, Miss Stapleton. If you meant no more than meant no more than this when you first spoke to me, why should you not wish your brother to overhear what you said? There is nothing to which he or anyone else could object." "My brother is very anxious to have the Hall inhabited, for he thinks it is for the good of the poor folk upon the moor. He would be angry if he knew that I said anything which might induce Sir Henry to go away. But I had done my duty now, and I will say no more. I must go back, for he will miss me and suspect that I have seen you. Good-bye." She turned and disappeared in a few minutes upon the scattered boulders, while I, with my soul full of vague fears, pursued my way to Baskerville Hall. All right, Chapter 8, The First Report of Dr. Watson. Okay, let's see how long this one. No, it's not too long. Maybe we'll get through it. From this point onward, I will follow the course of events by transcribing my own letters to Mr. Sherlock Holmes, which lie before me on the table. So this is John Watson writing. He's the narrator. One page is missing, but otherwise they are exactly as written and show my feelings and suspicions of the moment more accurately than my memory, clear as it is upon these tragic events, can possibly do. So here's the letter. Baskerville Hall, October 13th. My dear Holmes, my previous letters and telegrams have kept you pretty well up to date to all that has occurred on this most God-forsaken corner of the world. The longer one stays here, the more does the spirit of the moor sink into one's soul, its vastness and also its grim charm. When you are once out upon its bosom, you have left all traces of modern England behind you. But, on the other hand, you are conscious everywhere of the homes and the work of the prehistoric people. On all sides of you, as you walk, are the houses of these forgotten folk, with their graves and huge monoliths which are supposed to have marked their temples. As you look at their gray stone huts against the scarred hillsides, you leave your own age behind you, and you are and if you were to see a skin-clad, hairy man crawl out from the low door fitting a flint-tipped arrow to the string of his bow, you would feel that his presence there were more natural than your own. The strange thing is that they should have lived so thickly on what must have been the most unfruitful soil. I am no antiquarian, but I could imagine that they were some unwarlike, harried race who were forced to accept that which none other would occupy. All this, however, is foreign to the mission on which you sent me, and will probably be very uninteresting to you, to your severely practical mind. I can still remember your complete indifference as to whether the sun moved around the earth, or whether the earth moved around the sun. Let me, therefore, return to the facts concerning Sir Henry Baskerville. The sun around the earth or the earth around the sun aspect is something that comes up every so often in Sherlock Holmes stories. Like Watson is absolutely boggled that like Holmes genuinely does not know which one is which and does not care. Okay. If you if you have not had any report within the last few days, it is because up to today there was nothing of importance to relate. Then a very surprising circumstance occurred, which I shall tell you in due course. But first of all, I must keep you in touch with some of the other factors in the situation. One of these, concerning which I have said little, is the escaped convict upon the moor. There is strong reason now to believe that he got right away, which is a considerable relief to the lonely householders of this district. A fortnight has passed since his flight, during which he has not been seen and nothing has been heard of him. So before when they were arriving, there were like guards and policemen and such all over the place, looking for an escaped convict who was like a very famous murderer. So, spookily. All right. So a fortnight has passed since his flight, during which he has not been seen and nothing has been heard of him. It is surely inconceivable that he could have held out upon the moor during all that time. Of course, so far as his concealment goes, there is no difficulty at all. Any of those stone huts would have given him a hiding place, but there is nothing to eat unless he were to catch and slaughter one of the moor sheep. We think, therefore, that he is gone, and the outlying farmers sleep better in the consequence. We are 4 able-bodied men in this household, so that we could take good care of ourselves. But I confess that I have had uneasy moments which I thought of the Stapletons. They live miles from any help. They are one maid and an old manservant, a brother, a sister, and the brother, the latter not a very strong man. They would be helpless in the hands of a desperate fellow like this Notting Hill criminal, if he could once effect an entrance. Both Sir Henry and I were concerned at this situation, and it was suggested that Perkins, the groom, should go over to sleep there, but Stapleton would not hear of it. The fact is that our friend, the baronet, begins to display a considerable interest in our fair neighbor. It is not to be wondered at, for time hangs heavily in this lonely spot to an active man like him, and she is very fascinating and a beautiful woman. There is something tropical and exotic about her which forms a singular contrast to her cool and unemotional brother. Yet he also gives the idea of hidden fires. He was certainly a very marked influence over her, for I have seen her continually glance at him as she talked, as if seeking approbation for what she had said. So she keeps looking over at him to see if he's mad about what she says. I trust that he is kind to her. There is a dry glitter in his eyes and a firm set to his thin lips, which goes with a positive and possibly a harsh nature. You would find him an interesting study. We came over to call upon Baskerville on the first day, and the very next morning he came. So this is Stapleton. The very next morning, he took us both to show us the spot where the legend of the wicked Hugo is supposed to have had its origin. Hugo being the Baskerville long ago, who got himself cursed, so that this hellhound is chasing the family forevermore. Honestly, the guy deserved it. Hello, hello. Hey, Green Vault Line. So our neon logo was done by Samantha, who is our marketing person. She does a bunch of our graphics and everything too. She's amazing at it. And I'm very fond of our neon logo. I hope you like it. I think it's a really cool little twist on our own library's logo and makes it sort of, fun and unique. Thanks for asking. Thank you. I will tell her. I think I'm very fond of it. I'm a big fan. So thank you. I will let her know. All right, so back on into it. So he's showing them the spot where Hugo started the curse. So it was an excursion of miles across the moor to a place which is so dismal that it might have suggested the story. We found a short valley between rugged tors which led to an open grassy space flecked over with the white cotton grass. In the middle of it rose two great stones, worn and sharpened at the upper end until they looked like the huge corroding fangs of some monstrous beast. In every way it corresponded with the scene of some old tragedy. Yeah. I'm being told we need to clear out, so we're good. I think all right. I'll cut us off after this chapter because I need to close up. So we found a short valley with rugged tors. It looked like teeth. Yeah. In every way, it corresponded with the scene of some old tragedy. Sir Henry was much interested and asked Stapleton more than once whether he did really believe in the possibility of the interference of a supernatural in the affairs of man. He spoke lightly, but it was evident that he was very much in earnest. Stapleton was guarded at his replies, but it was easy to see that he said less than he might, and that he would not express his whole opinion out of consideration for the feelings of the baronet. He told us of similar cases where families had suffered from some evil influence, and he left us with the impression that he shared the popular view upon the matter. On our way back we stayed for lunch at Merripit House, and it was there that Sir Henry made the acquaintance of Miss Stapleton. From the very first moment that he saw her, he appeared to be strongly attracted by her, and I am much mistaken if the feeling was not mutual. He referred to her again and again on the walk home, and since then hardly a day has passed that we have not seen something of the brother and sister. They dine here tonight, and there is some talk of our going to them next week. One would imagine that much would be very welcome. Yet not one would imagine that such a match would be very welcome to Stapleton. And yet I have more than once caught a look of the strongest disapprobation in his face when Sir Henry has been paying some attention to his sister. He is much attached to her, no doubt, and would lead a lonely life without her, but it would seem the height of selfishness if he were to stand in the way of making her so brilliant a marriage. And yet I am certain that he does not wish their intimacy to ripen into love, and I have several times observed that he has taken pains to prevent them from being a tete-a-tete. That's always a fun word to say. By the way, your instructions to me never allow Sir Henry to go out alone will become very much more onerous if a love affair were to be added to our other difficulties. My popularity would soon suffer if I were to carry out your orders to the letter. All right, so I'm going to stop it right there because we are running out of time and I am needed elsewhere. We will be back next Tuesday, roundabouts 10 a.m. ish. Might be delayed if I have to relocate to a different room randomly again. Normally we're in the teen program room, but that was being occupied today, so I commandeered the creative studio, which is where we are now. Our creative studio, if you are not familiar with it, is a really great place within our library. We have a lot of things in here that you can come and you can use. We've got behind me is a vinyl cutter. Over here, over there now is moved our 3D printer. We have a sewing machine, a sublimation machine. There is a giant poster printer over there. And in the back window back there, you can see that is our sound studio. So that's a place where you can go and film, record, all sorts of things. That is an option for me sometimes, but someone's in there currently, so it's a pretty great place. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. See you next week. Enjoy. Hopefully it's not too toasty for you. It's a pretty gloomy little rainy day today for us. So, and I love the rain. So yeah, all right.